Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the last of the Jewish Film Festival of Fairfield County's Winter Series. My name is Nancy Schiffman, and I'm the Director of Arts and Culture at the Stanford Jewish Community Center. The Jewish Film Festival of Fairfield County has a 20-year history of bringing current, award-winning films to the Fairfield and Westchester County communities. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, both individuals and organizations, whose generosity makes this festival possible. Although we're not at the State or Garden Cinemas any longer, we'd like to thank the Friedman family and Garden Homes Management for their continued support and dedication to the festival since its inception 20 years ago. We're incredibly grateful to our festival co-chairs, Jennifer Kaufman, Debbie Lee, and Lisa Popper, along with our tremendously dedicated festival committee members who work endlessly year-round, screening hundreds of films to bring you the very best. Lastly, our deepest appreciation to you, our audience. Whether you followed us over the past 2 decades or are new to us, whether you've seen us in person or virtually, thank you for being part of the Jewish Film Festival family, building community through film and meaningful conversation. And that's just what we have in store for this morning as we commemorate Yom HaShoah. We are grateful to have with us director Laura Seltzer-Duny talking about her film Nobody Wants Us, a fascinating little-known story about refugees fleeing the Nazis in 1940, trapped on the steamship Kwanzaa in the port of Hampton Roads, Virginia, unable to disembark. It's my pleasure to welcome Laura Seltzer-Duny, who is a freelance documentary filmmaker and production company owner based in Annapolis, Maryland. As a director, producer, and writer, Laura has been producing, directing, and managing the production of award-winning documentaries and educational programs for over 15 years. She founded Seltzer Film and Video for the purpose of producing social action documentaries to inspire change. Laura began her career in New York after studying filmmaking at New York University. It's also my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Beverly Stein. When Beverly and her husband David moved to Stanford over 30 years ago, their first stop was the JCC to register their older daughter in the Sarah Walker Nursery School. Since that day, Beverly has been involved in every aspect of Jewish community, serving in many different leadership capacities, including Hadassah, United Jewish Federation, and Shoki Jewish Family Service. She currently serves as VP of Strategic Planning at UJF. Wow, what a thrill to have both of you with us this morning. Thank you so much for carving out time in your very busy schedule, especially you, Laura, because I know if I recall correctly, today is your husband's birthday. So a big happy birthday shout out to him.
Absolutely.
Wonderful to have you both.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
We are as well. And in fact, Laura, this is an incredible story. We have lots of questions about how you came across the story, what you learned about the situation and the people involved, as well as the making of the film. And in fact, the film really also raises the question about how we respond to refugees today. And unfortunately, there are hundreds and thousands of people seeking safety from Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, Mexico, and so many other places. So really, we're very excited to kind of hear what you have to say. We want to let our audiences know that please feel free to put in any comments or questions that you might have in the Q&A. Beverly, we really look forward to hearing what questions you might have. And in fact, let's start by let me turn the floor over to you. So thank you both.
Thank you, Nancy. And hello, Laura. I'm super excited to begin our conversation. And as I told you before we opened the webinar, I have seen this movie a number of times, and each time it hits me emotionally, it impresses me, and I'm blown away by the lawyers, by the community, and what it took to help get the refugees off of the steamship. So my first question to you is, we'll start basic. How did you learn about the Kwanzaa, and what prompted you to make the documentary?
Sure. So I grew up in Newport News, Virginia, and it just so happens that my great aunt and uncle, my uncle had a law firm that I never knew him. I never knew of this heroic moment of that he did in 1940, in September of 1940, when he found out that these refugees were coming to my hometown port. As you all have seen in the film, they were just coming to refuel and then be sent back to Europe, like to who knows what demise. And he was able to save these refugees. He and his law firm, he was able to hold the ship at port while activists took the fight up to the White House. But it's been really a joy to work on creating and documenting this film, because I didn't only learn about my great uncle and aunt as unsung heroes, but also there were a lot of unsung heroes that helped these refugees every step of the way.
Yeah.
And that to me was something that I just found really resonated with me.
So this wasn't a family lore, so it wasn't something passed down from generation to generation.
Right?
And I'd never heard of this steamship prior to your movie. So did you read it in a book? Did somebody tell you about it? How did you find out about it?
So my cousin came to me and he said, I think I'd like to make a feature film about this, about my grandfather. It was my cousin's grandfather. Wow. And this was like 2012. And I hadn't even heard about this story. I didn't know the fact that I didn't even know that refugees had come to my hometown, Holocaust refugees. And I grew up learning about the Holocaust in Sunday school and Hebrew school. And I learned about all the atrocities, right? We all learned about the atrocities. Right. The Holocaust Museum was built when I was, I don't know, was I a kid, but, young adult. And, you learn all about the depth of the atrocities. But what about the heroes? What about, there's so much light in the midst of this horrific darkness. So that's kind of like why I got excited about making this film, because my cousin told me about it. And I said, I'm a through and through documentary filmmaker. I started out working in films, feature films, and I realized early on that my calling is to tell true stories, giving the real people their voice, often unsung heroes, or unheard voices. That's my passion.
I like that. Yeah. So you hear about this story, you decide, okay, I'm going to do a documentary. How did you even begin research? How did you go about that process?
So something super cool was my cousin, Stephen Morowitz, his uncle, David Morowitz and Stephen Morowitz, as you guys know, were featured in the film.
Right.
And they're steamship Kwanzaa experts. So everything about they had the ship, gave me the ship manifests, they gave me photographs of that, a few photos that they had. Actually, they had a nice amount of photos. They gave me all the contacts of the survivors that they had tracked down. So it was really great because I already had subject matter experts on my team. They became my executive producers. Uh-huh. So that is where it started. I started reaching out to the survivors that we thought were still living. And sadly, many had passed by 2012. It was 2012 or 2011, maybe 2012 when I started reaching out. And I ended up, luckily, I was able to interview 3 in-depth interviews to give their perspective as a 3-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 16, 17-year-old. And there's how we got started.
And when you contacted these survivors, were they jumping to talk to you, or did you have to do some convincing to get them to be a part of this?
So Annette, the 3-year-old, she said, now older,
grown up,
but 3-year-old in 1940, for her reluctance, but she wasn't reluctant in participating, but her reluctance was that the memories that she had as a 3-year-old, she had very little memories of that moment in time, that time period. But her sister Malvina had told her mini stories, and it had been documented. Like, sadly, Malvina had passed away already by the time 2012 happened. And I want to say, I feel like I know Malvina, like really know Malvina. I feel like she's, she's she's in the film, but she's not, but her story's in the
She
film, right?
feels like she's in the film though, even though,
Yeah.
we don't see her face.
Right. Like, she was the one who, yeah, she was the one who got seasick on the when the ship was rocking. She's the one who saw the colored bathrooms and thought that she was now coming, she was like going to be considered colored.
That was a very moving scene when you showed the colored bathroom picture and her sister talked about her reaction to it. That was quite striking, I thought. And it really kind of showed that feeling that they still didn't feel safe.
Yeah. And that there's this happening in our own backyard as well, right?
Right. Yes. It took me to today in different ways.
Oh, good point. Today and then, the racism, anti-Semitism, hatred, othering. Simone, who was 13 at the time, she was thrilled to be on camera. She's the one who was like, who said, it wasn't the Queen Mary.
She was quite feisty.
So great. I felt like she became my BFF immediately. She was in San Francisco. We flew out to San Francisco for that interview. And it was so sad. Sadly, she passed away before the film came out.
But does she have family who were able to see the film?
Yeah. Oh, that is a great question too. I've become close with her daughter, and I've gotten to know her grandchildren, and her son, and they've come to many screenings, and we've just connected because of it.
And how did the families react to seeing the film? Because it had to be quite emotional for them.
Yeah, I think it was emotional for them. I think they were just so great because the mom had passed away just within a year or two before. I think they were just grateful to have her story told. And they would always joke. They joked a lot about how, oh my God, Mom would have loved to be at these events. She would have become everybody's best friend. Like, she just was like that. She's so great.
It would have been the Queen Mary to her.
Yes, she would have been the queen at the event. And then, and the last one was Irving Riddell, who was in New York City. And in the beginning, he was just like, who are you? Like, do you really have the facts? I need to make sure you know the facts, first of all. Like, he tested me a little bit. And then he felt like, why do you want to tell this story? Like, I survived. He's the one at the end, who says, I survived, but 6 million didn't. And that's the real story that you should, like, he felt like that was the story that should be told, and that he had a lot of survivor's guilt, which I don't know if he ever admitted that, but I think he did.
He may not have even understood it. Did you find it difficult talking to them? I mean, this was a tough time in their life, and they were young when they were going through it.
Yeah. So when I go in and I did the interviews with them, I didn't find it too difficult during the interviews. I just thoroughly enjoyed unpacking it all. And we got into details. Like, I spent hours with each of them, really unpacking the details, because as a documentary filmmaker, you don't know what is going to be used in the end. What goes in the cutting room floor and what is in the film. So then I go home and I sit with her with the footage, and I think about the footage, and then I unpack the footage. Like, I was thinking about how like Annette, the 3-year-old little girl who, she was dodging bombs, literally like one step ahead of the Germans, right? Like, Mom was throwing her into a ditch and covering her with her body. And I'm sure I definitely at the time was like, oh, wow, oh, shocked at hearing it. But then you watch it and you think about it, and then you start to look as a filmmaker. Then I look for footage, and then I find that footage. Was so common that Germans used this as a tactic to get people to flee. So what they would do is, I was learning this while I did my film, they would drop the bombs not to kill people, but to move them, like kind of like ants. Like
Wow.
you could see, yeah.
To rush them along.
To rush them along. Where were they? I don't know. Yeah, they were just trying to get them to flee and bomb, just devastate communities.
That's kind of funny. Where you mentioned that you would find the footage, and I found that technique where you had the historic footage, you had the drawings, and you had the interviews. It was so effective in terms of moving a difficult story forward, and yet at the same time bring the past to the present. What made you think of doing it that way? Is that your normal technique? And did you think of another technique, that you rejected?
Okay, so the ideal technique would have been to actually have animation, so have those watercolor drawings animate, move, but I didn't have a budget for it. But
reality set in.
Reality sets in all the time, and then sometimes reality becomes better than what the other could have been. But who knows? It could have been really cool to actually animate the watercolor, like have the watercolor move. But what we did was we commissioned this wonderful watercolor artist, Pauline Legere in Canada, who I found online because she had done some other drawings, and I fell in love with her work. And I just thought this would be perfect. She's very understated and very thoughtful, and we created for about almost 40 watercolor illustration drawings, hand painted. And what I would do is I would pick a freeze frame from one image. Unfortunately, there were only a few images that, these refugees fled with, right? So there's one picture of Annette in Brussels or Antwerp, Belgium. There's one picture of Irving standing, as a 16-year-old in a dapper suit in Belgium.
Quite the guy.
I know, quite the guy.
Quite the guy.
Totally ready to tackle the world.
And girls. He had that look about him.
I'm sure, for sure. And so because there was just one image of them at the time, one or two of all of them, I would take the image that might have been this big, and then I would imagine what was around that image. And then we would draw that. And I would also take images of other, like there was another image of a little girl, a 3-year-old little girl that wasn't Annette, but it was video. So I would, as you guys might remember, she was afraid of losing her mom on the ship.
Right.
And then there was a little girl holding somebody's hand, and then the hand was left, and she's kind of standing there with a teddy bear in her hand. And then I froze it. Yeah, so I froze that black and white image, and then I went into the video. And then I went into the illustrations with voiceover actors.
Yeah, I thought it moved beautifully because the historic footage became emotional. And then the watercolors were actually very simple and soothing, and yet very specific. And then you had the voice. And the technique, I thought, really made the film incredibly effective. So my compliments to you, because I was quite taken with that. So you said that you get all this footage. How do you decide, was there anything you left on the cutting floor that you thought later, maybe I should have used it?
I'm thinking that's such a good question. Nothing that I feel like I could have used, because we pretty much combed through all the Holocaust archives. The archivists at the U.S. Holocaust Museum were great, and we found other archives in Britain, and we just found some great archives. But there was footage I had found originally that later I found out wasn't specific to Belgium, or was just not pertinent. Like maybe I was talking about refugees escaping, and successfully, but it was not pertinent footage. Like maybe it was footage from Poland. And so I had these amazing subject matter expert team who gave me advice on, and watched the film and said, great, can't use that clip. Or make sure you put a upper third on the clip, specifying that we're fast forwarding to the future. We're thinking about what could happen. So that was great. I had an amazing team of experts.
How did you locate them?
Well, let's see if I can, my brain.
Your brain can remember.
Well, they're all like well-known Michael Berenbaum. I don't know if you know that name, but he was amazing. And Miriam Klein, she's a subject matter expert. She's a Holocaust survivor and she teaches Holocaust.
Rights.
And rights. And Olivia Mattis. Olivia Mattis is the director of the Susan Mendez Foundation.
Oh.
And I've gotten to know a lot of people because of the Susan Mendez Foundation, which is a great organization. And I'm now, I'm very involved with them. Susan Mendez was quite an unsung hero in my film. I had never heard of him, and many people had never heard of him before. Should I talk?
Go ahead, because maybe not people listening have it. What he did and how many Jews he saved against his country's instructions were unbelievable.
I mean, my God, what a role model, what an inspiration. And I wonder, would I have done that? So this man, he was based in France. And these refugees from Belgium came to France and they were trying to get visas, life-saving visas. And this Portuguese ambassador was told, do not issue any more visas. Done. We're done giving visas. No more visas to people. The world is crumbling and this man cannot listen to what the law is telling him to do. And he says, quote unquote, like he's not quote unquote, but to paraphrase, he says, I'm going to listen to God and I'm not going to listen to what man's telling me to do. He was a Christian, a Catholic, and he issued upwards of 30,000 visas, 30,000 visas that he wasn't supposed to issue. I mean, if that is not, and he has been awarded many, lately he's been starting to really get recognized, but it's taken a while for people to know.
But he was also punished. He lived a very difficult life at the end of his life because the Portuguese government was not happy and they did punish him for it. He lived a poor life at the end, which was absolutely horrific. Speaking of someone who did that, if you think about it, Malin, he went down. He was under very clear instructions from Breckenridge Law not to let them in.
Yeah.
And why do you think he turned around and said, oh, they're all political refugees?
Another guy, I wish I knew more about him. What an amazing unsung hero. He was this, he worked for the State Department and he was told to, and this was per Breckenridge Long's war diary, how I learned about this. And he said, Breckenridge Long says, he wanted Patrick Murphy Malin to delay. Do not let these people off the ship. Right. Because if you keep delaying it, they're going to have to leave soon. And, he didn't realize that, J.L. Morwitz was like dogged and he kept holding the ship at port for all of these various reasons. He literally, J.L. Morwitz held the ship ransom and nobody could pay the ransom. So they had to keep the ship at port. And then he kept holding it for various reasons. I'm not a maritime lawyer.
He found every loophole he could find in the law is what he really did.
Yeah, successfully so. And I what I'm told, from the family stories and the court documents, he was dogged. I mean, he didn't get much sleep. It was only a blink of an eye. It was like a couple weeks, but he was determined to do the right thing and help these refugees. He was hired by one family, but he saved all of them. And
that's the interesting part, is that he was really technically to help one family, but he made it his personal,
Yeah.
Goal. I mean, to make sure everybody got off that ship.
Absolutely. And then back to Patrick Murphy Malin, as you guys know on the film, in the 11th hour, literally the 11th hour, it was like around 11 o'clock at night. He arrived that day and he was like, it was nighttime and he knew it was like a good time to do this. He was just like, listen, I'm listening to my heart. Get off the ship. Just go, 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 go. And then they called National Council of Jewish Women, the local women who had saved, they had been bringing them kosher meals that week. And that's super cool to me because we can all do stuff like that, right? We
Right.
can all do stuff like that.
It's so easy to bring clothes and food. It doesn't really take us time or money in reality.
Right. But you feel so good, right? Like when you do these little day volunteers opportunities. And so they called, I think it was someone with the American Jewish Congress, the local American Jewish Congress. His name is going blank in my mind, but he called the National Council of Jewish Women president, and she called all of her people, before internet, it's the telephone chain. They all brought their cars down to the pier and they filled their cars.
But think about this, at 11 o'clock at night, they didn't say, oh no, I'm sleeping, I can't come. I have something I have to do, call me tomorrow. Right. They mobilized, and some of them brought their teenagers. I mean, you can see it in the film that there were some teenage, they mobilized as though it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is the most normal thing in the world for us to do. Would we do that today? Our lives are so busy. Would we stop and say, okay, we'll save a life?
I know. I hope so. Right? Don't we hope so?
We do hope so.
That's what I hope this film will challenge us to think about. What would I do? Right. What would we do? What can we do when we're faced with these opportunities? What can I do?
Without thinking twice, can I just say to myself, a life is more important than whatever it is I'm doing right now?
Yeah, we get really wrapped up in the things that are important, and they are important. Jobs are important, commitments are important, but
I think Ukraine taught us that sometimes there are things bigger than us happening.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. We're working on a film now. My current film I'm working on. It's called Las Abogadas. It's called that, which means the lawyers. And in Spanish, the lawyers, which is it's so cool. Like I'm not a lawyer, but I'm following all of these lawyers in the Nobody Wants Us film, and now Las Abogadas. And this is a more cinema verite style film where we have given the lawyers iPhones. We go in and we document their work it is lawyers in Mexico helping refugees today figure out how to find safety in America. And these are people who are suffering horrible, really barely escaping really horrible atrocities. And
so these are Mexican lawyers or American lawyers?
They're all from America have they're either still living in America, some are still in America, but go down and work and they speak Spanish and they know the ways, the ins and outs of maneuvering the immigration law system. Or one of them is actually living there now. 2 of them are living there now. They moved, and they've actually retired officially from being a lawyer, and now they're doing all this incredible volunteer work to help refugees find safety. Barely.
This sadly, it parallels what J.L. Morowitz was doing in terms of he knew nautical law and he's helping refugees. And now we're talking 80 years later.
Right.
And we're still talking about the problem of refugees who are fleeing for their lives and how do we help them get into this country?
Yeah.
We have that in Afghanistan, we have Syria, we have Ukraine now. It's rampant. What have we learned over time, do you think?
Okay, here's my takeaway. Here's the takeaway I like to have is that there's always going to be atrocities in the world. period. That's human nature, right? Like humans are not necessarily great creatures in the world, right? We're just not. But we have a lot of good. We have a lot of capability of doing good. And so just like there is light in the darkness during World War II, there were a lot of good people who stood up and were upstanders, and they did the right thing, right? Were not bystanders, which, as we know, being a bystander, it ain't so great either, right? Just not being too worried about our own lives and, letting others perish, is just not always the right thing to do.
Right.
And also obviously perpetrators are no good either. So what I love doing, I'll just say what I love doing is focusing on those that choose to be the upstanders in bad situations, because it's not so great now for refugees trying to get to America and who are escaping horrible situations.
Are you interviewing the refugees, or are the lawyers? I mean, when this documentary comes out, will we hear from their perspective also?
Yeah, we get a little bit of their perspective, but it's the focus is more on the lawyers, and it's like, it's also you see a lot of that. This is like a newer term that I'm learning: vicarious trauma that the lawyers suffer, like, because they're constantly trying to help, and they feel the trauma of the people they're representing, but sometimes they can help them, and probably often they can't. There's so many thousands of refugees trying to find safety. And I, as a filmmaker, am also feeling, I don't want to get emotional, but I might a little bit. Like, I've been thinking a lot about this recently. I go in, I will maybe interview somebody from a Holocaust survivor and learn about these atrocities, or go down to Mexico when we've been filming for the past year, and see some horrible things that people have survived. And we take the time. I spend a day with somebody, I interview them, and then I leave.
Right.
And then I leave. And then I think about it. And it's so hard, because then I take their story and then it lives with me, not just in my memory, but in the video, in the edit room. Like, we're living with this story. And then we're unpacking it emotionally, like, and where am I going with this? I guess that it's good to have empathy, and I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out, we've been really fortunate because we are actually in the midst of being able to help one refugee family through who we met in central Mexico.
So you're becoming your great uncle in terms of following in the footsteps of Jill and Sally in terms of helping.
We can all do that. That's the point. That's the point of the story, right? We can all do it. It takes a village. Big time takes a village.
That's what we learned on Kwanzaa. Look at how many people it took to keep their spirits up, to keep them with clothes and food, to, simple as a doll. I mean, the types of things it took to keep everybody hopeful to get off that ship, and the town moving, and the lawyers.
Yeah, it was such a scary journey for all of them, for every single one of them.
Yeah, and I would assume that the Morowitzes and the town people also felt a certain type of depression or victimism, because they too couldn't just snap their fingers and make it work. They were working up against a government that they had no control of changing.
Yeah, I mean, and also I think the biggest thing is that we could say we are saving one life, but there's so many like what what someone said at the end of the film, Harry Morwitz.
Right.
I forgot his exact words, but he was like 18, a William and Mary law student at the time, and he was working with his dad in that law firm in Newport News. And so he's helping. And what did he say? He said, we could have saved so many more people. Oh, that gets me emotional.
Do you ever think about the sentence, or I don't remember where exactly it was, but because Malin let in the Kwanzaa,
Right.
Long made sure that no more refugees came in.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what a trade-off.
Oh my God.
I mean, how do you say the word 80 some odd people? And that's the end. That's all this country had room for.
And then do you think that they felt guilty because of, like, you know?
I don't think Breckinridge Long felt guilty. I wonder how FDR ultimately felt, but I don't think.
No, Breckinridge Long agreed. I totally agree. He was anti-immigrant. He was an isolationist. He was anti-Semitic. He was happy not to let more people in. But do you think maybe Patrick Murphy Malin felt bad because the law was changed? Or I don't know this, but, yeah. or JL Morwitz, because, now somebody it would have happened anyway. And it
could have happened at the next ship. And what they did was, in my opinion, the right thing. They saved who they could save. And they didn't know what the consequences were going to be. But it was shocking to me when I realized the consequences of this event. So tell me, why do you think Eleanor Roosevelt got so involved?
Well, she had heard news a year prior. Many ships were coming in, right? Many refugees were seeking refuge in the U.S. and many did get in earlier. And a year prior, though, the big news in New York was, the ship. The St. Louis, the steamship St. Louis came in. We rejected them. They got sent back. And at this point in time, we don't know that many of them are going to perish, but it was a big deal, right? It was a big deal that we sent these refugees back. And she was also just wanting to help. And she had gotten word from Stephen Wise, Rabbi Stephen Wise, and he really begged her to help, and others had asked her to help as well. We're reaching out to her. She was getting lots of phone calls, and this was in Breckinridge Long's diary, that he was being flooded. Breckinridge Long was being flooded with phone calls and telegrams and telegraphs, and Eleanor Roosevelt is bugging him about it, and he was sick of it. He was just like,
he just doesn't care.
No, it's like me first, America first.
First, yeah.
Yeah.
We won't go there.
Yeah. Blanche Wiesen-Cook, she helped flesh out the Eleanor Roosevelt story, which was nice. She was amazing. Blanche Wiesen-Cook. Blanche Wiesen-Cook, I'm saying her name right this time. And she had written 3 definitive biography, or 3 volumes about Eleanor Roosevelt and the Roosevelts.
How did you get a hold of Long's diary? That was a real treasure trove.
It was in the Library of Congress.
Well, that logically makes sense, but I didn't think of that.
Yeah, and Stephen Morwitz and David Morwitz had done a lot of research, so they were helping me with all these documentations too, which was great, which really adds the credit. First the film came out, it aired once on PBS for the first time, the first edit, the first cut. And then that's when I ended up getting some more subject matter experts involved. And then, I forgot where I was going with the story.
Well, didn't PBS want you to make it longer? I know at some point I read that you were a 30-minute documentary, and now it's like 44, 45 minutes.
Yeah, they wanted me to make it a full hour, but it just didn't fit. It was just perfect. This 43 minutes was so perfect to me, because my ultimate goal was to get it into schools. And I thought it was a good length for schools to then watch it together and then have a dialogue and then give homework, and then you can talk about it more the next day. We created these 14 modules, learning modules, which I'm like really proud of, with the subject matter experts.
For what grade or grades?
Yeah, so it's standard approved for junior high and high school kids.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's social studies, history, language arts. I think there's 3, but a lot of universities are using it, especially law firms. I mean, not law firms, law schools.
Law classes, yeah.
Classes, Judaic studies, history classes, refugee schools that are focusing on refugee issues.
And how did you get it out there? What kind of PR did you do so that people knew it was there?
Once it aired on PBS, a lot of my films air on public television on PBS. Mm-hmm. And once it aired on PBS, it started getting distributed to PBS stations around the country. Mm-hmm. And then I had an educational distributor, New Day Films. They've been helping me distribute the film to schools around the country. And we're in almost 200 schools now, which is great.
That's fabulous.
But I really want to get into at least 300 more. Like, I just really think that it's important that this is an opportunity to really use the film as a great teaching tool. So
it's a great teaching tool for the Holocaust. It's a great teaching tool for today. And I think it's a great teaching tool for how we should be treating each other.
Yes. Oh, so well put.
So
point. Yeah, how we should be treating each other.
Which it seems to me that the work you're doing today, I know I'm going back and forth, but the work you're doing today really parallels all of that in terms of how should we be treating each other, because that's what it comes down to. Yeah. If we care about each other, then we'll see the other person's pain and then we'll step in and help, hopefully.
Right. Creating that empathy. The last module of our teaching tool for schools is all about, it's not even the last module, it's actually part of every single module. What can I do? You know, tutor an English language learner, create a refugee club. It's more geared to kids, but we can do it too. We can do these things. We can tutor, we can do gather items for our neighbors in need.
It's true. Now, what kind of feedback have you gotten from it being used in the schools?
Well, earlier this week, I was in Louisville, Kentucky, and I got to speak to a class, St. Francis of Assisi's eighth grade class.
Oh, wow.
Amazing group of kids.
Great age.
Watch the film. And it also genuinely has to do with the teacher too. Like, when you have a teacher who's really thoughtful and thinking about what this story is teaching and really wants to create empathy, right? Empathy with the kids, and learning from our history. These kids, I went in, they had watched the film and they had so many comments and questions, and it really renewed my faith in our next generation. Not renewed, but continued it, because I know, like, I would love to see this film in like all 8th grade classes throughout the country. So if anybody who's listening to this is interested in like gifting the film to a class, we can help you. You can visit my website. It's nobodywantsus.com, and then there's a button right at the top. I want to get the film to a certain class. You fill out a form and we take care of it for you.
Oh, that's nice. And then you get the guides that come with it as well as the film. That's actually really good to know. So I keep going back and forth, I know, but do you have any contact with the Morowitz family? I know they're your relatives, but so you've got a lot of contact with them. Do they have contact with survivors over the years besides?
Yeah. Okay. So I think around the early 2000s, David and Stephen met with some of the survivors, and in New York, and they did, I think the Washington Post or the New York Times, did a beautiful article about them. And so that kind of established their first like connection. And then they stayed friendly. And now, flash forward 10 years later, now I feel like I have a really special relationship with some of these refugee family, Holocaust survivor families.
Right. And their children. So yeah, it's not just,
And their children. It's so nice. I
It's-
feel like I really do feel like we have we're a little bit related, but we're not.
Well, you are through circumstances, if you think about it, family helped and therefore you're part of family.
Mhm.
So now, has this been shown outside of the US?
Yeah. It's been shown in Africa. I can't remember where, and it has been shown in the Middle East. I can't remember. It's been shown in South Africa. I think in Australia, I saw.
Wow.
Portugal, somebody in Portugal. So people will purchase the film through my film distributor.
Mhm.
And so I see what country it's where they purchased it from. And yeah, and I really would love, I don't speak other languages, so they would have to speak English, but like I'd love to talk to those schools when
they're going to schools. That is where they're going. So it's in English. So if it goes to Portugal, you don't know if they're translating it into Portuguese or if the people watching it understand English.
They must understand English, right?
They must, right?
They must. But we are going to be translating it into Spanish, and we haven't thought through what other languages we're going to translate it to. But Portuguese would be a great one, right? Because of
the connection. You would think maybe the foundation would want to be a part of distributing it in Portugal.
Absolutely.
A good tie. Brenda in our audience would like to know, can you tell us more about the comments from the Kentucky 8th grade class that surprised you?
The comments that surprised me. I'm trying to think of what might have surprised me about what they said. I mean, I was just blown away by their intelligence. Like, of course, they're going to be intelligent kids, but they were so thoughtful. And what I really loved, one kid said to me how she could really relate to the National Council of Jewish Women, the women who brought the food, because she does that with her mom. Like, how great is that? So she felt like, she's helping with food,
Yeah. That's a wonderful connection.
Is that I'm on a sailboat right now. I'm just going to tap on that noise to quiet. Okay.
I'm jealous. Wait a minute. You're on a sailboat. Life is tough.
Yeah, it's all right. We're sailing, right? We're not moving, but my husband is doing something.
Up on deck.
Yeah, I apologize for the noise.
It's good. I want to remind the audience that they should put any other questions they have in the Q&A. And I'm going to tell you, this has been a phenomenal discussion. I love talking to you. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Anything else you'd like to say about the movie, about your feelings, your thoughts, what you're doing now that we've talked about a lot?
Let's think about that. I mean, you were just such a pleasure talking with you. I mean,
Thank
such
you.
a pleasure. I feel like I'm just talking to my neighbor sitting right next to me. But we've really covered a lot of topics. We all can make a difference. One individual can make a difference. We can, and I feel like a lot of times we feel like the world is so crazy and oh, what difference can I make? But the thing I choose to do can change the life of one individual's world tremendously. Right?
Right. I think your documentary changes the life of those of us who watch it, because it puts into perspective what's happening and how we can be a part of the positive, not the unsung heroes. And I think you do that just absolutely beautifully. And I have to personally thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank the two of you. I could listen to the two of you talk all day long, and I agree with you. It was a very easy kind of two friends talking and some incredible conversations, some incredible pieces of information. We at the Jewish Film Festival, Fairfield County, actually had the Susa Mendez story, the film, in our festival a few years ago. So was an extraordinary man, and his story does need to be told, and we spent a lot of time on it, so it's a great connection. And I love the message that you're leaving us with, which is there is always the ability to put a little bit of light in some darkness, and that we have the capacity as human beings, compassionate human beings, and as a community to make the difference to somebody, to one soul. And I have to be honest, at the JCC, we have a lot of opportunities where we try to band our community together, and all of our Jewish community organizations. I find, we're fortunate in Stamford, Connecticut, that our community really does band and help each other, and that has been a highlight of my living in this town. So I just wanted to kind of put a little shout out about that. I think that that's a precious takeaway for us all, that there is a lot of darkness out there, but there's also a lot of light, and we need to focus on the light and expand the light. So
Absolutely.
thank you both so much. It's really an
You.
incredible film, and just really enjoyed every part of this conversation.
Thank you.
I would love to thank the audience for being a part of this as well and for joining us. If you know of anybody who'd like to see the film, it is still available to watch before midnight tonight. They can visit our website, stanfordjcc.org/film festival. And the Center for Arts and Culture at the Stanford JCC offers exceptional programming throughout the year, whether it's our book and author conversations, which we've had the pleasure of Beverly moderating one of those. And, we adore Beverly and her ability to create wonderful dialogue. So, Beverly, thank you so much
My
once
pleasure.
again. We have other things like our art gallery at the J with our art and wine receptions, our book clubs, film club, JSAC, our social action initiatives, and J Cares, our volunteer opportunities. We just talked about that. And we have a monthly food collection as well as other items for the community. It just takes a little to make a big difference. And I just love that message. I'm also excited to announce that today starts the JCC Sahal Shalom program, which is back in person. And we at the JCC bring officers from the Israel Defense Force to our community to speak with adults and teens and children throughout this week. So please join us for any of the events, so you can hear the stories and experiences of these courageous and accomplished men and women. The schedule of the events and registration can be found on our website, stanfordjcc.org. And I just want to once again thank the two of you and to thank our audience. It really has been a beautiful morning, a great way to start a morning. And we hope to see all of you, the audience, soon, and have a terrific rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.